of Stewart Pearce, and welcome to my series of Deep Dialogues. These are vital conversations I engage in with global soul stewards from all over the planet, providing us with vital understandings about how we can create a new hierarchy of values to help us evolve into a brave new world. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
And namaste, namaste, namaste to dear Jude and to all of you wonderful people tuning in. I know we have several people listening in who are not commenting, so welcome to those people that are writing in the comment box. Lois, Laura, Julie, Doris, Monica, and I know lots of other people will be streaming in. We have the wonderful Jude CURRIVAN with us, who is an extraordinary friend to Deep Dialogues, has been on several times, and in the last season of Female Soul Stewards, Jude came and spoke with us. And I thought it was really important to have her come back on to extend the wonder of all that we were dealing with during that time. This is one of her extraordinary books, The Story of Gaia, but also to take over some of the essential principles that she was sharing with us within the context of, is the cosmos friendly? Which we'll delineate as we get through to it, and also within the construct and the context of what's happening in our lives today. And by that I mean collectively, as we look towards the difficult hardships that are being experienced both in the Holy Land and of course in Ukraine and Eritrea and other areas of the world. So welcome, Jude, welcome. It's so gorgeous to have you here. I've been excited all day thinking about this time. For those of you who are unfamiliar of who Jude is, this is a very considerable force that we have with us, as you'll see. Let me give you her bio. Jude is a cosmologist, a futurist, a planetary healer, an author, a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, and previously an international businesswoman. So you can see that she has many multiversal talents, and of course is a profound mystic. She has a master's degree in physics from Oxford University, specializing in quantum physics and cosmology, and a doctorate in archaeology derived from researching ancient cosmologies. She has traveled through 80 countries working with wisdom keepers from many traditions, and is a lifelong researcher into the nature of reality. Jude is the author of 7 books, latterly the award-winning bestseller, The Cosmic Hologram of 2017, so just prior to the outbreak of the extraordinary pandemic that we experienced, and The Story of Gaia in 2022, and is co-founder of WholeWorld-View. So this is a very considerable intelligence that we have with us this evening, and we were just in pre-show chat musing on the whole substance of cosmos friendly, which of course is a borrowing from Albert Einstein's statement at the beginning of the 20th century, which he, quote unquote, is the universe a friendly space? And maybe we can open at that point with, is the universe a friendly space? That automatically, for me, appears to be slightly reductionist, that it confines the nature of the universe into this space. I wonder if you could share with us what you feel he was perceiving, and how indeed we have learned over the last 100 years and more of expanding our intelligence into non-local, non-time, non-space as a review point for the infinite wisdom of the cosmos.
Thank you, Stu. Well, first of all, it's my delight to be with you again in your community. I love what Deep Dialogues are exploring, and what an amazing time for us to be together to continue that exploration. Just to sort of respond to your point around Einstein. Einstein essentially was a mystic. Some of his sayings may have appeared to be materialistic, But he knew very well what I now say, that mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They're literally what we in the whole world are. So in that sense, when he talks about friendliness, he's really understanding the interrelatedness of our universe and the interdependence of our universe. Because, profound relationship, really is loving relationship. Whether it's friend, and I also absolutely feel that the universe has a sense of humor. And as a friend, I always look for friends with senses of humor. So there is that too. But yes, I would agree with him. And I think what has been wonderful is that he passed over in 1955, and I arrived in this Earth walk in 1952. And his astrology and mine mirror each other. So he had a sun in Pisces and a moon in Sagittarius, as I do. So I've always felt a great affinity for his journey. And I think with the century or more since he brought forward his understanding of space and time, we've had the most extraordinary, not just technological movement, because that's come off the back of what he, a quantum physicist, discovered. But for me, far more was the deeper understanding that to a large degree was put to the side for that century. In other words, the clues that the quantum physicists and he gave us in terms of the unified nature of reality and its multidimensionality were put to the side because they were deemed too philosophical. And so the focus was on technology, which is where we've come to. But now what is so wonderful is that we're having scientific breakthroughs and discoveries at all scales of existence across many, many different fields of research, which are all converging into this understanding of a non-locally unified, multidimensional, living and loving universe where it embodies innate meaning and evolutionary purpose. So other than the prior worldview of materialism and separation, that's being turned completely on its head. And because it's being done so not in the quantum scale or the very large scale of 20th century science, we're seeing it at every scale, including that of our everyday lives. So we're seeing the same patterns playing through our collective human behaviors as, for example, we're seeing throughout the natural world at all scales. So this isn't just a scientific revolution. This is a revolution in how we see ourselves and our relationship with the whole world. And I would love us to step into an exploration of this as a universe that seeks to evolve. It actually embodies an evolutionary impulse to evolve from simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity and self-awareness. So we have meaning, we are purposeful, we are its microcosmic co-creators.
Wow, what a beginning. What a beginning. And of course, I hasten to add, it's not a biofeed. I hasten to add that his linguistic was very much a context of those times.
Yes, sure.
And we know he was a polemicist, of being a profound mystic, but obviously was immensely he chose his language with such deft skill so as not to either disenfranchise himself or the establishment that was burgeoning within his scope, but also for people to understand the greatness of what the potentiality was all about. And of course, it was a very fascinating time that he emerged out through, as we saw at the end of the 19th century, with the burgeoning substance of spiritualism and the emergence of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky and Madame Blavatsky really formulating what it was from an intelligent perspective to be mystical, based within the science of esotericism, and how he was very aware of those movements and how there was a tremendous interest, as we know, through the revolution of truth at that time, which was sort of slightly thrown into chaos by the First World War, but then burgeoned on through this great understanding that we have now that there is really no separation.
Mhm. Absolutely. And you know, when you look back at that time, as you say, it was in the midst of the First World War. He came forward with the special theory of relativity in 1905. He came forward with the general theory in 1915 when war was raging. But also the other folks who were around at the same sort of time, the other physicists, the quantum physicists, such as Max Planck and Schrödinger and others, also understood this deep, deep unified perspective. And in fact, some of the quantum physics ventured to India because what they were realizing was what they were discovering had its most articulate roots in the writings of Vedic India thousands of years ago, and the Upanishads, you know, the commentaries on reality and the nature of consciousness. So they went there to actually more deeply understand what they were discovering. And of course, the other move that came through the First World War afterwards was Theodor and this whole idea of a planetary consciousness, a noosphere. And since then, that whole journey has continued through people like David Bohm to now. But now we have so much more evidence. We have so much more that interconnects into a framework, and a very straightforward and simple framework that enfolds quantum physics and relativity physics, but shows that the appearance of our universe, its energy, matter, its space-time, is not its most fundamental nature, that it emerges from deeper levels of cosmic intelligence and causation as meaningful, vitally meaningful information, and that the whole universe is holographically manifest. It's real, but the way of its co-creative essence enables the sort of laws of physics, which are themselves very simple when you nub down to them, to just interrelate themselves to enable a universe that not only exists, but also evolves.
And as you look into this time from your own vision and perspective, both as a cosmologist and as a mystic, is there one particular salience that fascinates you most about the possibility of the evolutionary spirit of the cosmos? Is there one particular thing that, as it were, turns you on at this particular time?
Well, a lot turns me on at this particular time. Apart from my usual chocolate biscuits and red wine, but I mean, absolutely.
And lots of tea, I seem to remember.
Oh, lots of tea, Stuart, lots of tea. Yes, I think so. For me, when I was writing the Cosmic Hologram, and obviously before the Story of Gaia, and this idea that, we were taught at school that our universe began 13.8 billion years ago. We didn't know the date then, we do now, as a Big Bang. And we know that it was facetious. It was a facetious term given to the origin of our universe by cosmologist Fred Hoyle, because he was more comfortable with an infinite, eternal universe. More and more we've appreciated, and the evidence has accumulated, that the cosmos is infinite and eternal, but our universe is finite. So that finite beginning 13.8 billion years ago. But instead of a Big Bang, we know it wasn't big. But that implied chaos of a bang is now completely refuted, because we realized our universe began in the most incredibly fine-tuned, beautifully ordered, and first moment of an ongoing big breath. So I retermed it the big breath. But what it did was it also really brought me into a sense, and a more and more experienced, embodied sense of every breath I take, the universe is breathing through me. And it brings that vast, wondrous evolutionary story into a very intimate, embodied perspective. And of course, in tradition, in Vedic tradition again, that was how they described the universe, the out-breath of Brahma. And so we're now convergent with leading edge science, and these wonderful universal wisdom teachings and spiritually based teachings are converging. The other, and of course, the other view of breath is prana. In Vedic, in Sanskrit, it's prana, means breath and spirit. So this is what excites me, because it's bringing all of this into this convergent perspective that we can not only understand, but we can experience and we can embody. As spiritual beings having a human experience. This is bringing all of that and the multidimensionality of all of this, because what it's revealing is a universe that is non-locally unified. So all our experiences, our multidimensional experiences, supernormal phenomena, synchronicities, intuition, are all natural. They are our heritage. They are who we are. And now we're being invited, I think, to an incredible adventure of exploration as this whole worldview and this understanding invites us, into our evolutionary potential.
And so, being the empath that you are, with this extraordinary mystical awareness and a total belief, I believe, in the divinity of cosmos, as the woman that you are, as the empath that you are, there must be moments where you review the world at its state of flux or in its state of flux, where you feel the vibrations of a darker force that's at foot and around us. And the point that I'm really touching into is that then you have the appreciation of the cosmological intelligence that you've developed through many, many lifetimes, but particularly as we're sitting in this life, this particular life. Is there a restorative? Is there a palliative? Is there a healing? Is there a gentle comfort that you receive from the divinity of the cosmos to help you understand more about your role in solving, healing any of the disquietude that we see, for example, in the war-torn areas of the world?
For sure, absolutely. And also, I'm here to support and serve that healing and that evolutionary consciousness that I feel the universe is inviting us forward to be. I want to sort of respond, I hope, more fully to that point, is that our journey as human beings, we're as old as the universe. I talk often about the hydrogen in the water of our bodies is only minutes younger than the entire universe. A lot of the waters in our bodies and the waters of Gaia is older than the birth of the sun and our planetary system. We have a long, long heritage to this point. We are incredibly complex. Each of our bodies is a community of 37 trillion cells that comprises not just human, but fungi and bacteria and viruses. And it's the most extraordinary journey from the first moment of our universe's big breath to this point. And what the universe does as it has moved from simplicity to complexity, through stars and planetary systems and to us, is ever greater levels of individuated self-awareness. Each of us are unique microcosms of that universal understanding and intelligence. And part of our journey, it seems to me, over the past period of time, is to move into ever greater perceptions of our unique individuation. But what that's done, it seems, is it's taken us down a path that, without blame or shame or any of it, has sort of brought us apart from the web of life that our ancient ancestors, I believe, perceived themselves to be. They would not have seen themselves in any other than part of a dynamic, living web of life. And that includes, the whole cosmos as they would have perceived it. But our journey, and especially over even the last few centuries, has progressively moved us down this path of individuation. And a worldview that is founded on that progressive sense of separation has naturally resulted in the behaviors that have brought us to this existential crisis on the one hand, but also what we might reframe as a potential metamorphosis. Because what it's really done is it's taken us down this route of individuation, but it's rather like caterpillars. We've become a caterpillar type species where we've extracted, exploited, we know what we've done. But a point comes in that journey of a caterpillar where there really is enough. The caterpillar can't eat anymore. And it goes into a process of dissolution within a cocoon or however it may be. And in that process of dissolution, it's not that the caterpillar's journey has somehow taken a wrong turn. It's the natural journey of that caterpillar to come to that point where it can go into a cocoon, and its old image, its old identity, who it thinks it is, as it were, breaks down, and the butterfly begins to emerge. And when that happens, the what's called imaginal cells of that butterfly are attacked by the dying immune system of the caterpillar, and that makes the butterfly stronger. So I actually feel we're in that sort of metamorphosis. And there's a time when the whole breakdown of that caterpillar may look like something that we're feeling at the moment. But what I'd really like to share with everyone is not just to see the breakdown, but also perceive the breakthrough and the potential for our conscious evolution, that we may become pollinator species. Because that is, if I look at the universal evolutionary impulse, that's the direction of travel and the invitation. If I look at my own perspective of the empath and the walking between worlds that I've done all my life, that's what I see. If I also look at the astrology of these times, that's what I see. And of course, there are dark aspects of this. How could there not be? But it is our collective moment of choice. Do we wake up to remember we're inseparable, therefore see each other through a lens of wholeness and empathy and compassion and friendliness? Or do we continue to try and walk this path of separation, which for me, the perception is the only end point of that would be extinction, because Gaia won't allow that. There's too much potential evolutionary potential within the universe. And we've seen this, time and time again, where species or a whole range of species come almost to a completion of an evolutionary arc, where their complexity can evolve no further in terms of biology, nor in terms of their level of awareness to conscious evolution. I actually believe that we are the first species on our planetary home that has this opportunity. And I would really be loath for us to waste it. It is such an incredible invitation.
This is fascinating. What a wonderful synthesis. Have you written this analogy, starting off with the chrysalis, and how there is a comparison with what we, because there is a devolutionary force that then springboards into an evolutionary, so that we begin to see, as it were, the intrinsic nature of the meaning of plurality, that nothing is singularly plural. This being the only planet of choice, which is talked about in some mystical enclaves. And I subscribe to that. It seems that, this is an extraordinary cosmic experiment to see with the law of two, see what we do with it, how we extrapolate. Have you written that?
I wrote a very small piece called Metamorphosis that I can certainly send you to share with your community.
I'd be fascinated, yeah.
It really is. It's a tiny little piece, Stuart, but I think it speaks to people because, as you say, when we reframe crisis, as metamorphosis. Of course, the word crisis itself, as you well know, the Chinese glyph is both danger and risk and opportunity. When we reframe it as metamorphosis, I hope that folks can really get a sense of,
Yes.
this is a meaningful rite of passage that as a species we are going through, and we do have choice, of course, but hopefully our choice will be to emerge as butterflies.
Yeah, yeah. And you have an immensely sophisticated linguistic, but you're able to describe this in, I believe, very frank, honest, and simple terms, so that we can all grab. But at the same time, there is another element within many people's lives, which is the one of fear, which is the one of
Yeah.
neuroses. And I'm sort of comforting as many people as I possibly can by saying, well, if you weren't feeling that at the moment, you'd be a sociopath, because there's a great deal of conflict going on in the world. The
Yes.
question is, if we can detach, feel stillness, and observe, so that we literally not subdue, but we transmute a lot of the raw noradrenaline and cortisol in our bodies, the fight-flight instinct, that when we begin to resist the temptation to serve the conflict that we see, which is obviously based on an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, which just leaves everybody toothless and blind at the moment, So obviously that a modus is no longer a convention that is applicable to the way that we're evolving at this time. Is there anything specific that you can, as a meditative process or as a pure moment of changing physiology, is there anything that you can remind us about that we can do whenever we look at our TV screens or we pick up something on YouTube? I mean, there's so much information at the moment about the horrors that are taking place. Is there anything you can recommend?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience in this, and I wholeheartedly appreciate that it is a very, very challenging time for many, many reasons, of course, whether it's climate anxiety or whether it's, putting on the news and hearing the horrors of what's happening in the Middle East and Ukraine. I guess what I would share is it's behavior that is natural when we look at the world through a lens of separation. So anything that any of us can do to either to find our own inner practice, whatever may work for us, it may be meditation, but it may be just being in nature. It may be just playing with a child. It may be dancing around the kitchen table to ABBA, which is my preferred way of doing it. But whatever it is, I find what makes our hearts sing and sing it. And that isn't because it's so easy to get caught into the drama and the awfulness of what's happening. When we can just take a little step back, when we can find, however simple, what makes our hearts sing for each of us, and do that, make sure we nurture ourselves in that way. Just nurture ourselves in that way. We're then able to serve this metamorphosis in whatever way we can, because there's a third aspect to that fear. It's either fight or it's flight or it's freeze. And often it's that freeze that we just can't do anything. And yet when we can breathe, I would say if that feels like that, again, coming back to the breath, just take 3 deep breaths and feel the universe breathing through you. Literally feel the intimacy of the universe breathing through us in each breath. Allow that, enable us to then calm and relax into that nurturing, into that incredible benevolence. Just allow ourselves to relax into that benevolence. And then the other thing I would invite us to do, hate is not the opposite of love. Fear is the opposite of love. So if instead of being fearful, through that breathing, through that heart singing, we can choose love. Not on Sundays or high holidays, but every opportunity to make a choice, to try and remember to ask ourselves, what would love do? And to do it.
Beautiful. And so actually, as you speak these things, I'm returning in my mind to the concept of individuation and how it was given, as it were, legitimacy by Carl Jung, who was developing this true understanding of the archetypal consciousness of we humans, the archetypes being keys into our internal cosmology, and how individuation was really about moving into an independence where fundamentally we felt ourselves to be in co-creation with that extra transcendental promise, which was our belief, faith, and trust in a divine power. And so you're bringing us back into what that divine power is, which I believe is what was playing through my consciousness when I was thinking about us meeting and where we possibly could go. What was the hidden potential in relation to, is the cosmos friendly? Meaning that if there is that cosmological splendor, if we can delight in the wonder of the richness, not through understanding the clever formulae of fractals, but by just simply seeing the wonder and the awe, the beauty and the delight, and allow that to flux through us, rather like you dancing around the kitchen table while you listen to ABBA, we begin to see what the true source of that level of creativity is all about, because it's transcendent. It transforms us, which of course, as you and I know, is what fundamental literature can do, whether it's in prose form or in verse. And in fact, I won't be chaotic by paraphrasing JFK in 1963, but I'll send it to you afterwards. There are three extraordinary statements that JFK made about the whole substance of, if we are lacking in poetry, automatically we become hostages to the ego, and as a result of that, violence is perpetrated. That's the power of the crystallization of the vibration of the universe within the power of poetic thought, within the metaphoric nature of consciousness, which of course many of us have become really reduced from, and we're almost forgetting a feeling literacy. That when we try to define the way that we're feeling, we say, well, I'm stuck, rather than, which is obviously the quantification of standing outside ourselves and reviewing what's going on inside, rather than getting to the point of, well, actually the reason why I'm feeling it, as you were just saying, is because I'm deeply frightened.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how honest that is. And I feel that as soon as we do this, we automatically begin the evolutionary bridging into the healing of whatever we're fearful of, and the huge potential that is there, as Rumi says, wherever the wound is, that's where the greatest light is.
It is indeed. And, from an astrological perspective, I think both the sojourn of Pluto in Capricorn and now moving into Aquarius is offering us, on an archetypal level, both individually and collectively, and with Chiron's help, the wounded healer's help through this process, is we are realizing the level of personal collective trauma. We're realizing how that has accumulated through progressive, worldviews of separation and all the behaviors that have come from that. And I think it's really, really vital, Stewart, that we don't just keep going around that, but we realize that this appreciation enables us to come together to heal that trauma within our collective psyche. And over the next few years, I think we're getting progressively more and more support and help in doing that, because unless we release our collective trauma, it's like dragging this huge weight behind us. And it's not that, again, there's not a shame or a blame on that. It's just part of that individuated journey we've been on. But if we can collectively, through whatever processes, and there are many modalities and many processes that we can undertake to journey to this healing perspective, it liberates us to then consciously evolve. And it's not we have to be wholly healed to evolve. It's a dance, isn't it? It's this dance of the more we're able to be empowered in our wholeness, the more we can move forward. The more we move forward, the easier it is to release the trauma of the journey to now. And the archetypes are absolutely, it seems to me, with us. They are us. They are our
They
collective
are
as individuals.
living entities. Yeah.
They are. But I mean, what I'm really loving now is as a student of astrology as well as cosmology and much else, is how the outer planets, these generational outer planets, are really now moving forward, with Pluto moving into Aquarius. But the planets, all the outer planets, are changing signs within the next year and a half. And if you look, they're moving into aspects with each other that support transformational change, that support evolutionary emergence. So with all the going on, I do have great optimism, realistic optimism, that
This
we
is beautiful.
can move through this.
We need Jude in our lives every day. Do you hear this, everybody? Because with this extraordinary ability to address the cosmology of what's taking place now in this moment in relation to the astrology, which some of you may be not fully aware of. And I would ask, I hopefully you've made notes about what Jude was saying about Pluto moving into Aquarius, because it is immensely significant at this time, particularly for the United States of America, isn't it? I just wanted to return to, and therefore we heal the startle reflex that freezes us, as you were saying, and it's difficult to breathe. I was preparing this for another context, but I must just share with very sweetly, T.S. Eliot, The Four Quartets. At the still point of the turning world, there the dance is, except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance.
So powerful.
I mean, there's a devout Anglo-Catholic, but speaking from his own rather tortured perspective about these infinite degrees of cosmology, because he was such a lonely creator and felt unseen and unappreciated by the culture that he was brought up in, initially in America, and then, of course, as we know, here. And particularly estranged from the woman who he was in love with, who was, who liked to exchange her energies elsewhere, shall we say. Fascinating. So when we come back to that moment of stillness, we can actually reflect on the infinite nature of how vast we are. You referred just now to I think you mentioned 38 trillion cells.
37 trillion cells. But what's a trillion amongst friends? I mean,
I know, because I went into a definition earlier. I thought I'd better do my sums properly. And, where did I go? Well, of course, I went into Wikipedia. And there was a certain controversy, meaning that there was a suggestion that the majority of males have 36 trillion cells and ladies have 28 trillion cells.
it's not about size, Stewart. It's not about size.
And then I leaned into dear Deepak, who was talking about the fact that with the average human being has over 100 trillion cells in their bodies, which is infinitely greater than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Just to give us perspective, not in terms of developing that egoic formulator, or you see, but actually the awe and the wonder of the fact that the cells within our bodies are really in complement with the extraordinary nature of the Milky Way. There's a point of industrial intelligence as far as the great divine intelligence.
So that. Can I give you another factoid on that?
Yeah, do.
In each of those cells, we have DNA, okay? Our DNA is literally tied on, bound, blah, 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 blah. It is a fractal, a 4-level fractal when it comes together. And when it comes together, the DNA in each of our cells is smaller than we can see. It's microscopic. But if you were to take it and to spread it out, the DNA in every single of our cells is about 2 meters across.
Wow.
The DNA in the cells of each of us, if that was stretched, would stretch across the entirety of our solar system, the diameter of our solar system. And if we take the 8 billion of us and the DNA in all of us, it would go multiple times across the diameter of our galaxy. I mean, talk about awe and wonder. And when the DNA opens up to be responsive to signals, and therefore the creation of proteins in our bodies, and then folds back again, it does so, as I say, it turns on, it turns on, it turns on, it turns. It never ever tangles. But have you ever tried to not ever have a computer cable tangle? And yet our DNA never tangles.
And I've never actually asked the question, well, why do cables tangle? But presumably it's to do with electromagnetic energy that is drawing them, whatever. I don't really want to go into it because what you're saying is much more ravishing. But it's at the same time when we look into that. So breathing in the Gaia, breathing in sacred pranayama,
Yes.
which is such a simple and deliberate act, but at the same time assuages, heals, and transmutes all of the chaos, all of the tangling.
Exactly.
Because it lifts us into that divine space of recognizing the elixir that we first breathed in and then gave that great roar of life in that moment of birth as we came forth from our mother's birth canals. Just extraordinary, and how the universe is reflecting all of this.
Yes.
Fascinating. Now, hopefully everybody's feeling a lifting up. I certainly am, from some of the information that I was sharing today, because I was working with a political journalist today who was about to deliver a speech. He was a very public figure, so I won't mention his name. But, the substance of the speech is formulated through the perspective of critical concern about all the varying priorities to do with the Islamic community, and of course anti-Semitism and Jewish. So I was trying to lift him up into moments of levity so that we could actually feel ways of being able to suspend the horror of what's taking place to see what its true purpose is. Well, I'd love to, therefore, just to once again come back down into what's taking place, which we clearly see as cathartic from a karmic point of view, and also to look at the nature of the Gaia in the way that you were exchanging with me in our pre-show chat about the nature of why the Holy Land is the epicenter that it is from a geomantic point of view. Could you share with us what you were sharing with me? Because that was so beautiful.
Well, we were talking about the Holy Land, as you say, and I explained that the Great Rift Valley, which is based on the sort of tectonic plates that run through Africa and beyond, and Europe and beyond, literally goes from southern Africa all the way through the Great Rift Valley, all the way then through the Jordan Valley, onwards through Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley, and all the way to sort of Syria and almost to southern Turkey. And so with my experience and work in planetary terms, human traumas are played out in especially rifted places along Gaia. For example, the sort of the Himalayas and the Pakistani area there, the Pakistan area there, is incredibly rifted. So it's no surprise that there's ongoing conflicts that play out along those rifts. So along the Great Rift Valley, there's been conflicts played out for millennia, many millennia. And when we look at the sort of 4,000 year story from Abraham and the whole Abrahamic story to now, that is essentially played out along the rift that plays out through what was the whole of, the whole of Canaan, the Jordan Valley to the north and to the south. So that's part of the piece. But also I would suggest that we're at a point now that, again, as a healer, I understand that we play out patterns of behavior on others. They play them out on us. We play them out to ourselves. And one of those patterns are, abandonment, abuse, betrayal, denial, rejection. So when I journey through 4,000 years of this story, which I have over many, many decades, I've appreciated just how much that do unto others, they do it to you, you do it to yourself, has played out along that whole area. And going, for example, to Auschwitz some years ago, and obviously working to do whatever I could to serve the release of the trauma of the Holocaust, nonetheless realizing that trauma was then moved into Palestine, moved into Holy Land, and what the Jewish people had been the sort of, on the receiving end of such horrors. They began in a different way and not to the same level, of course, as in Germany. But, in 1948, when Israel was declared as an independent nation, it was on the back of the Nakba, the catastrophe, the Palestinians. And you can never build peace on the foundations of war or conflict or whatever. And it's been 75 years, I think, continuing trauma on both sides coming to this point of unsustainability. So it seems to me now that it is so awful that it is unsustainable. And I think people, therefore, in the international community have realized it cannot be had a lid on. Just as in South Africa, when apartheid ended, the white community had tried to get rid of the black community, and it wasn't going to happen. The Israeli community will not get rid of the Palestinian community. Somehow there has to be a way of coming together in whatever way and learning to find peace together, because that literally is the only option for the security and the well-being of all the people involved. It's just got
beautifully put, thank you. So in very tangible terms, as a mystic, as a visionary, with all of this wealth of information as a bedrock consciousness within what we've just shared, as a visionary, do you see what potentially could happen as an intuitive to bring about peace? Can you see that?
Yes. I can only share what I can see.
Can you utter that?
Two things. First of all, when I was on Temple Mount, and I've been there a number of times, I was on Temple Mount and I was given the words, when the men of war become men of peace, then peace will prevail. So it's not that the peacemakers will grind, it's men of war that realize that war is not the answer. And I don't know who that might be. There's someone, a Palestinian leader who's been in Israeli jail for many years called Marwan Barghouti, who's renounced violence and has sometimes been called the Mandela of the Palestinians. I don't know who might emerge, whether it is him for the Palestinians, who might emerge Israelis, but that's what I was told. When the men of war become men of peace, then peace will prevail. The other thing is that, again, many years ago, I was at a place called Megiddo.
This has been playing through my consciousness for the last 10 minutes because of the rift.
Yes.
And the positioning of Megiddo.
Yes.
Anyway, carry on. Yes, thank you. We're psychically linked. I was going to say, okay, so can we return to the rift?
We can most certainly return to the lift.
I don't need to say.
And yes, I was at the Canaanite, the ancient Canaanite temple that is at Megiddo. It's now an archaeological site, but it overlooks the valley of essentially Megiddo, where the Bible talks about the final battle and Armageddon. Yes. And I had a vision standing on that ancient altar after doing a long journey to that point. I had a vision, and it wasn't a vision of a final battle. It was a vision of peace. And I saw this incredible sight of almost like, medieval tents.
Yes.
Arrayed throughout the whole valley. And it was like all the peoples of earth were there, but also it wasn't just the peoples of earth. There were multidimensional beings there. There were extraterrestrial beings there. It was like this incredible moment where the whole of humanity literally had woken up to remember we're inseparable, not just from each other in our planetary home, but literally from the whole world. And it was the most extraordinary experience
Mm.
to have that
So
vision.
it won't surprise you to hear that I had a similar vision in Megiddo in 1983. Yeah, 1983.
Okay.
I traveled with the partner that I then had, who was Israeli. I traveled all the way up the western seaboard of
Yes.
Israel, all the way to the Lebanese border, through the
Yes.
Judean mountains,
Yes.
stayed at the kibbutz, and then all the way. So we visited Megiddo, and that's that's literally what I saw. I initially saw the stimuli of the fact that it was a really profound site of summit conference from our extra ultra terrestrial friends.
Exactly.
But how there would be an inveigling, how there would be some form of interaction, co-creative interaction with when the situation reached a pitch of such fury that there would be this interconnected force. So this is beautiful because it gives us a visionary perspective of the possibility that the fact that you've seen it and I've seen it, and then I think that's really quite cool because I've mentioned it over the years to a number of other people of, very profound intellect, and who are also, within the community of the mind, body, and spirit world, but they weren't able to see that. So that's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. We're nearing the time of completion for this conversation, and I just wondered if does anybody have a question for Jude? Question. Lois, thank you, my darling. She's obviously tuning into DNA and how our DNA is wonderfully co-created with the DNA of our planet. Can you speak on the crystalline upgrade of our DNA, please?
A little bit, Lois. Thank you for the question. I'm having a sense of more of that coming as I am preparing to write my next book, which of course I don't write, it writes me. But the third book of the trilogy is very much about the story of us. And although I'm aware of the crystalline upgrade, of course, DNA is a liquid crystal. Not only that, but it's in Fibonacci resonance. And so what I'm seeing is that part of this evolutionary process is taking that sort of Fibonacci resonance to a higher octave through crystalline harmonics, essentially. So that's a very general response, but I'm sensing that more and more of that's going to come through in the coming months because I feel it's a significant aspect to our conscious evolution.
Right.
Because the other thing with DNA is the actual elemental makeup of it is optimal for holding quantum information and coherence for long term. And I feel that's being upgraded. And also, I think what the process is, it's helping us to remember more of our journey to this point, as well as the potential to consciously evolve going forward.
Mm, mm. And this ties in so beautifully with a lot of the work that I'm doing with the crystalline grid and how many of the crystal sheets of crystal, fields of crystal in the end times of Atlantis were placed into secret deposits, so to speak, particularly around the northeastern seaboard of the US, from Florida all the way up, and arcing over the Dust Bowl. And how so much of that crystalline presence is awakening at this time in a liquid state as a result of the emission of great light from the cosmos. So, what we see without is within, what is within is without.
Exactly.
That's absolutely extraordinary. I hope that helps, Lois. Did you get that? It takes time to receive comments. So, what else can we say? We're talking about
In the last 2 minutes we have.
So going deep into maybe bearing in mind the beauty of what you speak, maybe you wouldn't mind bringing us all together into a moment of meditation or indeed prayer, where we allow all of the beauty of our loving hearts to be generated towards these war-torn areas. And particularly, I'm thinking of the epicenter of the Holy Land. Is that
Okay.
something you'd like to
Yes,
do?
of course, I'll be happy to. And maybe to do that, we can just bring ourselves into that center of peace within us and take a few deep breaths together, very conscious that we are the microcosms of the evolutionary impulse and purpose of our entire universe. So as we breathe that through us, feel ourselves relaxing into its nurturing, into its loving presence that's always within us, because it is us. We are it. There is no separation between us. And perhaps we can also begin to perceive our universe as a soul, just as we are microcosmic souls. Our entire universe is a soul of consciousness, of cosmic awareness, and that the universe soul also has a heart, a universal heart that we can consciously connect with in every moment that we choose, because we are it beating within each of us. So let us come together in the universal heart with love that sees us, all of us, that loves us, every one of us equally, loves us unconditionally, sees us clearly without judgment, but brings that love into a living presence within every moment of our lives. And that love can empower us to rise above all the disagreements, all the things that we feel separate us, because they don't, they cannot, but instead welcome that universal heart love into every breath we take, into every thought we have, into everything we bring our hands and our hearts and our heads to, that we may be servants of its peace, that we may be servants of its living, evolving, loving reality. And as servants, that we may come together to serve the understanding that can transcend the current situation in Ukraine, in the Middle East, elsewhere, where the illusion of separation clouds us from the deeper truth that we are all one. So just take some breaths, continue to breathe the universe and the universal heart through our being, to be in service to peace, to be in service to our conscious evolution, to be in service to our cosmic destiny.
Beautiful. What a note to end on. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Stewart.
It's really paltry in relation to all of the wonders that you've given us, both in terms of your time, your generosity, and this extraordinary outpouring. Really, thank you. It's this has been. We're coming to the end of the 12 female global soul stewards, and the fact that you bring us this gift is really the cherry on the cake. You know, it's beautiful, beautiful thing. And hopefully you all receive that, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for coming along and attending. And I know many people are going to be listening to the recording. So from your heart, as indeed from mine, to the the heart of this beautiful lady that we have with us. Jude CURRIVAN, thank you very much indeed. And I say namaste, namaste to you. And may there be so many wonderful gifts coming in your direction to move you forward into the inspiration of this extraordinary next book as part of the trilogy. I look forward to reading it. So, Jude, if you wouldn't mind staying there for a moment, I'd love to say goodbye informally. And to you all, much love. Namaste, namaste. And don't forget, next week, I will have Julia Mick, who's a very extraordinary healer living currently in Colorado, but who rises out of the Middle European crises in Kosovo and experienced mystical experiences while her family and her community were being torn apart by war. So she has some very interesting perceptions to offer. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week and keep breathing in. Thank you, Ryan.